man.
I'm the boss, so I give out the orders. I got some shotgun shells that are filled up with quarters. Yeah, so the only cash you getting from me is spare change. Hope you're smart enough to bring you a spare brain. You know my range is point blank. I'm strange and point blank. I rearrange your face like a joint shank. You know every part of me bang. From my head to my toe, I fuck around and let your artery hang. I'm a leader, not part of the gang. Rather he to see the target and aim. Then squeeze like it's OJ. To the Pope, nigga. With a boat, nigga. Murder, one attempt, and assault, niggas. You could be skinny on a hope, nigga.
Yeah. What's good, man? Oh, I'm right at home. D-block. Fuck is good, man. So, shout outs to 78 Sports TV, putting in that fire, putting in those flames. So last night, this nigga dropped a video. It was entitled pretty much $500 for a pay-per-view card. So you come up with your own pay-per-view card. Somebody came to him for a request. He just went on, all out. I'm right behind you, 78. You come up with your own pay-per-view card that you yourself will pay $500 for. You put any matchup together you want in the history of boxing. And I guess, we'll decide if that shit is worthy. But $500 for your own sake, will you pay $500, right? This is, my job isn't the most entertaining job. I pretty much count up numbers all day. I count up revenue all day, and I compare it to last year's to see if the hotel made any money. So I get a little bored. So this task actually had me busy for a good 2.5 hours easily, because it ain't easy putting this shit together, and for it to be worth $500 for who gonna pay $500 for a pay-per-view match? Some people might from my list. I know I will from my list. Honorable mentions, man. Let's jump right into it. So, I got my top list, but this is just fights I think everybody would love to see, and I think that I'm not the only one that is thinking like this. I got Deontay Wilder versus the one and only, the great Joe Louis himself. I would love to have seen that fight. A lot of people fold under Deontay Wilder's hits and they just crumble. We all know back then they were tougher than what we are now. They had to fight a lot more frequent. Gloves, everything was less. Weight room, just equipment, sparring equipment, the gloves with the padding, certain weight classes that have to use certain weight gloves, certain ounce gloves, So I think that people of the older age, your Lewis, your Lennox Lewis, your Joe Louis, your Frazier, your Foreman, these guys, even Ali, these guys could have taken some heavy hits. And I think that these guys wouldn't have just gave up with one hit from the heavyweight king, in my opinion, Deontay Wilder right now. Shout out to Joe Louis. We all know Rocky Marciano did not beat the prime Joe Louis, because it would have been a different story, but we ain't gonna go into all that. Let's keep going. This next fight, man, I could not find anybody in the history. That's serious, y'all. I couldn't find anybody in the history of the fucking sport that could sit with a prime Roy Jones Jr. A prime Roy Jones Jr., Not saying there isn't anybody who couldn't do it. Shout outs to Boxing Beats and Rhymes. Shout outs to Chris Caban, Earl Jarrett. Shout outs, of course, one more time to that nigga 78. If you back then and you saw Roy, some people truly believe Roy could be second best fighter of talent of all time. There's nobody at his time that could sit with this dude. So I had to go into my Rolodex and go find somebody. And the only person I came up with the agility, the proper weight class in his prime that could move like this motherfucker, there's only one that I came up with. Y'all can probably come up with more, but I came up with the one and only Sugar Ray Leonard. I would love to see a prime Roy Jones Jr. versus a prime Sugar Ray Leonard at middleweight or welterweight, either one. I mean, damn, that fight would have been, oh my gosh, that shit would have been, you know what it is. $500, y'all gonna pay for my card? That's $250 right there. All right, next one on the list, I picked this fight because of just, these guys should, you know, these guys in your head should just match up sometime. If you're a true boxer, and I'm not a boxer puncher fan like a lot of people out there, you know, I like the slicksters. I like the slick boxers in the world, you know, but 78 had a bloodbath on his shit, and I need to get something similar that I, you know, because I have to step out of my realm sometime too. And this fight I got next is Calzaghe versus Carl Froch. Oh man, would that have been a great fight. Both of them in their primes. You know, Carl Froch is known to be one of the best British boxers of all time. Or he's definitely coming out to be that way because he's taking on all challengers. He fight anybody. Calzaghe went out undefeated. We all know if he, you know, faced a prime, you know, there's a couple fighters he could have faced in their prime that we feel would have gave him the business that he never fought. So I have to put somebody up there, and I'm choosing Carl Froch to dethrone the great Calzaghe. I don't say the great in some, you know, in somebody's eyes, but you know, if they can't fight anymore, man, people are always going to put these guys at Hall of Fame status. Calzaghe definitely sits up there as far as credibility to be on a list of who could match up with him, you know, equally. And I came up with Carl Froch. Make your own fucking list if you don't like it. Next. Yo, since the history of the sport, I haven't seen anybody else fight like Joe Frazier besides this man. I have the one and only Joe Frazier versus, I know people ain't gonna like this matchup, but like I said, there's nobody else, not even Tyson himself comes this close to Frazier as this guy. Joe Frazier versus Derek Chisora. I mean, when I see Derek fight, all I see is Joe Frazier. You know, that get down and dirty. I can slip jabs with just the bob of my head. Shout outs to these two dudes. Tyson could do it too, but that looks like Joe Frazier, you know. I had to go with Derek Chisora because I think Tyson might have been a little bit too big for Frazier. I could be wrong, but that's also my motherfucking opinion. I got the balls to put this video up, which some of y'all motherfuckers don't got the balls to do. Next, and shout outs to Floyd Mayweather for paying for Frazier's funeral, y'all. Yeah, that gets overlooked too much. Shout outs for, he has no ties with, he ain't have to do it. You know, if you look up to certain boxers, you really respect the game and you made it. You paid away for other motherfuckers who haven't done it, who have put their lives on the line and have, for your entertainment, you know. I worked my ass off all week long, and then when the weekend comes up, I feel I should be entertained. I've been entertaining motherfuckers all week. I feel it's my turn to be entertained. And I don't give a fuck who dies doing it. Not like that, but when it comes to football, I don't care who gets blasted, you know. Basketball, I don't care who gets crossed up, you know, not die. Come on now. But literally, I want to see the best of the best and some of the most grueling. And that's why I think sometimes people just overlook the fact of some of these greats that have paved the way for y'all motherfuckers to take it easier in some of your fights, man. So shout outs for Frazier, shout outs to Chisora. If this fight would ever go down, I wouldn't know who to pick. And shout outs to Floyd Mayweather Jr. for paying for the great paying for the great Frazier, Joe Frazier's funeral. Sorry, I'm driving, I'm trying to park and shit. You know, I ain't trying to mess up names here. Joe Frazier versus Chisora, Calzaghe versus Carl Froch, Roy Jones Jr. versus Sugar Ray Leonard, and the Bronze Bomber versus the Bronze Bomber. Deontay Wilder versus Joe Louis. So far in my thing, would you pay $500 for those matchups? Who knows? But I ain't done. This is honorable mentions. Y'all didn't want to give this man a shot. They still ain't giving him a shot. So I'm going to give him a shot. Shout outs to Keith One-Time Thurman. But listen, I can't give Keith no baby steps. Not on this list. For $500, Keith, you got to fight somebody who would probably give you the business. But obviously, I give you a chance of winning. In my opinion, Keith One-Time Thurman versus a prime Oscar De La Hoya. Boy, would I love to see this. Hey, this is my fucking list. Make your own motherfucking list. My list, y'all. Oh, man, would I love to see this fight. Holy shit. Keith Thurman, and don't sleep. Your man, the prime Oscar, in my opinion, would have beat the shit out of Manny Pacquiao. Straight up. Beat the shit out of homie. I saw Oscar move back then. I don't know if y'all went and did y'all research, but I went and did my shit. And your boy Oscar could move like lightning back then, boy. Shout out to Oscar De La Hoya. Oh, man, go see Oscar versus Jeff Mayweather. Oscar's undefeated. I think he's 4-0, facing Jeff Mayweather, the uncle of the great Floyd Mayweather himself. Jeff Mayweather is, I think, 34-6 or some crazy-ass record. But it shows that he's full into boxing where, Oscar is wet behind the ears still. But that fight clearly shows Oscar ain't don't joke with this nigga in his prime. He'll fuck you up. And that's why I still don't give credit to Manny for fighting Oscar way out of his prime after he fought Floyd. Man, just no credit at all for that fight. I'm not giving you any credit at all. You weight drain him out of his prime. He's not fighting, and he came off of a loss. He's not a champion. You're not hell no. Manny, suck a dick. You ain't getting shit. The prime Oscar versus the Keith Thurman right now at 24, 25, 23 years old. Phenomenal fight. We don't know. I don't know who will win. Phenomenal. That's nobody's giving Thurman a shot. I'm giving you a shot of a lifetime, nigga. I would love for somebody just to comment on that fight, who they think will win that fight, man. Next, these are just honorable mentions. I know I can't put 4 of these guys together and make $500. I would pay it. But, that doesn't mean you will. I wouldn't pay for Kawasaki and Frotch. I would just love to see that matchup. Not for no $500, y'all, nah. Next, I would love to see a prime Shane Mosley versus, right now, Timothy Bradley. I would love to see that fight. I was dying to see the Berto versus Mosley, because you would have got the Mosley that faced Margarito. You would have got the Mosley that faced Floyd versus Berto. And that would have been, some matchups need to happen, like Kovalev versus Stevenson. I'm still mad that shit ain't going down. Certain fighters are dead equal with other fighters until we can see the end of it, until we can see the fight actually going down and see who the winner is. We just got to put it in the air like, I don't know who will win. People do it with the Floyd and Pacquiao fight, but we all know Floyd will beat the shit out of Homo. I don't put it in my head. I already know it's a walk in the park. Easy fight. Prime Shane Mosley versus the undefeated Timothy Bradley, man. Phenomenal. With that being said, we move on to the next one. He wanted to jump up to 147, so keep him up there. But, don't put him in there with anybody crazy, but definitely put him in there with a quality competition that would fit for Broner. I'm talking about Broner. Broner wanted to jump up to 147. Let me pick out a 147 guy for you that I don't know who you could beat. Because you obviously couldn't beat Maidana, which I felt you could beat. So now I got to go back into my motherfucking tool shed. With that being said, I want to see Broner versus Andre Berto. I know, but give me the undefeated Berto. Give me the undefeated Broner and put them in the ring. You guys would pay for that fight, you selfish fucks, and you would. Oh, man, that'd be a great fight. Shout outs to both of them dudes for still doing their thing. Berto is like gatekeeper, as they put it, but every time Berto's in there, we all know this motherfucker got the chance to win it, just like, it's like he's not mentally gifted. Broner seems like he's physically and everything, seems like he's not mentally gifted either sometimes, you know? Sometimes you got to box and move with the brawlers. You can't brawl with all the brawlers. That's what makes you, you know, the standout amongst everybody. Let me get inside to roll this Dutch real quick because I got to go back out real quick. And now, my top $500 fights that I would pay $500 for. Because I wasn't going to put it on this video, but I don't give a fuck. You ready? At the bottom, I would love to see, and it could still happen, Gary Russell Jr. versus Guillermo Rigondeaux. There's no reason why this fight can't happen. They're in the same weight class. I don't understand why Gary couldn't get... before the Rigondeaux fight versus Donaire, I wanted Gary Russell to face Donaire. That's what I wanted. And really expose him, you know, but Rigo ended up doing it, so I wouldn't put, and I felt like, at that time, I felt like Gary could beat Donaire, you know, so I can't just do that right now. I don't know. Gary Russell versus Guillermo Rigondeaux, hey, give me an answer, y'all. Who y'all got? Phenomenal fight, you know. Guillermo is not letting Gary get close, but then again, Guillermo has not seen anybody's speed compared. I don't know anybody in the sport has seen speed compared to Gary Russell. So shout out to both of them, man, for still being on the throne. Both of them undefeated right now. So who knows, you know, who would win this fight, you know. Next on my list, this is my opinion. You know, this is my list. Fuck y'all, it's my list. I always want to see Lamont Brewster versus Mike Tyson. That's just my fight, y'all, you know. Brewster gave Klitschko the business, and I would just love to see, you know, they're both dead in height. It seemed like dead in width, you know, body structure. These guys, I couldn't find anybody closer than these two guys. Lamont Brewster versus a prime Lamont versus a prime Tyson. Don't just count Brewster out like that, y'all. Don't do it, because we all know Tyson couldn't stand up to a Holyfield, or could Tyson have stood up to the Klitschko? You know, we don't know, man, because if he couldn't stand up to top quality competition, B-level competition, I wouldn't say B, you could give fucking Holyfield an A competition. You could give Lennox Lewis an A competition or an A statue. You could put Tyson at a B. I mean, come on, y'all. Y'all just don't want to give nobody that crown. So, a prime Brewster versus a prime Tyson, phenomenal fight. In my opinion, that definitely goes on my card that I would love to see right after the Gary Russell versus Guillermo Rigondeaux fight. Next, like I said, I couldn't find anybody to fight with these two, you know, with these two fighters. It's hard to find matchup with these guys, man, especially when, first of all, nobody wants to call this guy out. Nobody wants to fight this guy. He's not going nowhere. Nobody's coming to him. So you got to go to him, you know? Andre Ward. Yeah, you got to be on the list, buddy. But I ain't giving you no freebie. I need you to go against the great, the one and only Roy Jones Jr. Yeah, buddy. I would, woo! Andre Ward versus Roy Jones Jr.? We have no idea who will win that match. People would say Roy because of his slickster, because he's a slickster, excuse me. But we all know Ward can be with the best of them. He can, y'all. Ward's shadow boxing skills and his I wouldn't say rope-a-dope skills, but his skills on the rope, his skill just to elude punches is on a different level than anybody in the game right now, you know? Him versus, you can pick him, Adonis Stevenson, Triple G. Nobody's sitting with this nigga. You need Andre Ward to go up to actually probably lose or to probably find somebody dead equal with him, you know? Anybody he goes down to or comes up to him, he'll probably beat, you know? Ward versus... You can't throw Canelo up there. Canelo's too far down. Like I said, you know, Roy versus your Stevenson or your fucking a Kovalev, or Ward versus Stevenson, Kovalev, or Ward versus you know, Roy Jones Jr. At that weight class, wow, phenomenal fight. Y'all would pay for that shit. And the #1 fight of all time, It was hard making this fight, man, but it just clicked. Like, this fight should have happened. Floyd should have called this nigga out. Of course, the money man is at the top. Floyd Money Mayweather himself versus a prime. I need the Floyd. I need the Floyd from the Gotti fight. Obviously, I need the Floyd from the Chop Corley fight. Best of all time, I need Floyd versus somebody that's dead equal with him that I couldn't pick anybody else on the planet in his weight class. Don't just be picking motherfuckers way up in 160, way down below. Floyd versus Prince Nassim, man. I mean, hey, pick your own fucking fights. Pick your own matches. As far as equality, these guys are more matched up than I can ever pick in my arsenal. I mean, maybe later on I can come up with another list. But right now, the $500 pay-per-view list, you got Guillermo Rigondeaux versus Gary Russell. Tyson versus Lamont Brewster. Everybody in their prime. A prime Roy Jones Jr. versus the prime Andre Ward. And I would love to see Floyd prime Gotti Ward or Gotti Floyd versus Prince Nassim, one of the best and most entertaining, if not the most entertaining boxer of all time, man. And had the skills to back up his noise. So shout outs to my list. Shout outs to the haters who ain't gonna like this list, because all y'all do is suck dick anyway. And shout outs to 78 Sports TV, man, for coming out with your list. If you could do an honorable mention list or another list, I know you got more in your arsenal that I just don't have the history on. I'm not, I wasn't back in those days to where I could really pick people, that would be a fight, but just what I've seen in my research, here's my $500 list. Will I pay $500 on pay-per-view for these four? Hell motherfucking yeah. Tyson versus Brewster, Guillermo versus Gary, Ward versus Roy Jones Jr., and Prince Nassim versus Floyd Money, the creme de la creme himself. My honorable mentions were Broner, Prime. These are all primes. Broner versus Berto, the undefeated Broner versus the undefeated Berto. I want the Mosley that fought Margarito. The Mosley, the prime Mosley that fought Oscar. I want him versus Bradley. Yes, the undefeated Bradley. Nobody giving him a shot. Keith one-time Thurman versus a prime Oscar De La Hoya. Holy shit, Keith, you want your shot? There go your shot, buddy. I want Frazier versus Derek Chisora, because I see nobody else that could really move like Frazier. And don't forget, Frazier was the one who beat the undefeated Muhammad Ali, y'all, for the first time. Shout outs to motherfucking Frazier. Shout outs to Floyd Mayweather for paying for that funeral. Carl Froch versus Joe Calzaghe. Great matchup, I don't think anybody could come up with a winner right now. I don't think they can. This is a fight that needs to really happen, that we could pick a winner of. I have it tossed up right now. Sugar Ray Leonard versus a prime Sugar Ray Leonard versus a prime Roy Jones Jr. Great matchup. I couldn't find anybody to sit with Roy in his prime besides Sugar Ray Leonard in his prime. And at the bottom, just have some fun with it. I would love to see him versus Idol Deontay Wilder versus Joe Louis himself. Bronze Bomber versus the Bronze Bomber. Let me know what y'all think of this list. It took me an hour and a half to 2 hours to make this motherfucking list. Damn near 2.5 hours. I was studying on this list for a long time, man. Shout out to 78 Sports TV. I hope all the heavy hitters come out with their own $500 pay-per-view list that you would pay. Not the fans. You yourself would pay $500 for your own list. Let me know, y'all. I'm out this bitch.